So our session is on financing fleet expansion, meeting global and domestic shipping demand. As global shipping demand rises and sustainability imperatives reshape maritime investments, financing innovative and future-ready fleets has become critical. For this session, may I invite our moderator, Mr. Anil Radhakrishnan, CEO, GMR Enterprises and Director, Bombay Chamber, and our esteemed panelists, Ms. Pallavi Raje, Executive Director, Transportation Finance, Standard Chartered Bank, who's joining us virtually. Mr. Praveen Kirolikar, CEO, Yeoman Marine Services Private Limited. And Mr. Anil Devli, CEO, Indian National Ship Owners Association. Request you all to kindly come on the dais. Thank
you. Good afternoon. I mean, it's really great to see you all. We know after lunch it's a difficult session, but we'll try to do justice for your waiting. We have eminent panelists here. Without wasting much time, we'll get into the discussion. Pallavi, you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'll just request all our panelists to just give a brief introduction, and then we can start the session.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Anil Devli. I represent the Indian National Ship Owners Association. We are an association that represents the interests of Indian companies who own and operate ships under the Indian flag. Thank you.
Thanks, Anilji. Praveen?
Hi, good afternoon to you all. My name is Praveen. I have about 40 years of experience in maritime. Started my career with Shipping Corporation, Chief Engineer. And thereafter, I joined the Indian Register of Shipping. And then with Wärtsilä in India for about 12 years, looking after the after-sales service and ship services. And thereafter, I joined Goltons India as an MD, and then just came back from an assignment as MD, Goltons Dubai, taking care of Middle East and Africa. Currently, I am with Yeoman Marine Services as a CEO. Thank you.
Thanks, Praveen. Pallavi, can you just give a brief introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to join virtually. So it's a great pleasure to be on the panel. My name is Pallavi Raje. I work with Standard Chartered Bank. I work in transportation finance based out of Singapore. And I cover South Asia and Southeast Asia. Standard Chartered has been very active in transportation finance, particularly shipping finance, which we kind of are around for 20 plus years. In terms of league tables, I wanted to say that as an international bank, we are ranked to number 12 in Marine Money with a portfolio of close to $9 billion. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Pallavi. As Captain Tyagi rightly mentioned, we talk about shipbuilding, the opportunities, but where is the money coming from? So we'll try to see whether we get some answers for that. And as you know, the global trade, global supply chain is going through a lot of changes. So a fleet expansion is not just adding capacity. It's in fact impacting even the profitability and the sustainability of the organization. So any fleet addition has to be a well thought through process, and it needs a lot of deliberations. I'd like to start with you, Anilji. Given the push on the shipbuilding by Government of India, what are the plans of Indian shipping industry and the way forward them to benefit? Do you see demand increasing for shipbuilding in India?
Thank you. Obviously, when shipbuilding activity does well and we are able to build ships economically within time and at a cost that can be sustained, we as an Indian shipping industry definitely welcome this. But imagine a scenario where somebody is sitting in a market, sitting down and selling mangoes. He needs to have when he's selling something, he needs to have a willing buyer. And it always worries me as to where is the buyer going to come from. In this case, it is the Indian shipping industry. Today morning, when Arjun was also making his presentation, he touched upon the fact that domestic demand seems to be extremely muted. And that is muted for reasons other than to do with the shipbuilding industry. It is a well-known and well-understood fact that Indian ships, when we have to compete with the foreign ships who operate in Indian waters, our cost of operations are 20% more than the foreign shipping company. Until and unless the government first makes Indian ship operating business competitive, there is going to be a lack of investment that will happen in this business. It is, in fact, cheaper now for us to go out and flag ships outside India. And in close to 90 years of the formation of INSA, and in about 13 years that I have been lobbying for the Indian industry, this year a record sum of an X amount of US dollars has been put in by us on flags outside India. So, because finally one has to, vote with your feet. And therefore, the point that I'm trying to make is that unless you empower the domestic industry, and of course, there'll be a huge amount of export orders that India can get. For example, again, Chowgullian Company, CSL have been engaged in carrying on a lot of export orders. But from the domestic side, the proposed JVs between SCI and Concor, SCI and oil companies will raise the demand. But as far as the other shipping industries are concerned and our members are concerned, our first primary objective is to ensure that we are able to compete with foreign shipping companies. Otherwise, it is easy for us to continue to buy ships and trade outside. Some of the largest companies in India today have close to 80% of their fleet operating outside India. And therefore, there is no logical reason for us to do any shipbuilding in India. But the good side is that when the government decides to apply its mind, it does a wonderful job. And the example that we should look and talk is the AS-TDS tugs contracts, where the government said that from tomorrow morning, I will not take any tugs which are not built in India. Now that gives a policy certainty. Then I know that no vessel is going to get imported from somewhere else and is going to come and compete with me. And that led to a spate of orders from Indian shipping companies. Indian shipping companies went to CSL and other yards. They continue now with the battery tug operators. There are companies in this room who have already got orders from our members. So we are ready to build and we are ready to operate these ships, because then you know that even if the cost of the ship is going to be marginally higher, or etc., still it is the government of India that has guaranteed employment. Because at the end of the day, I can't buy a ship which is costlier to make and then expect to compete in the world market, because at the end of the day, I have to compete with fleets which are made elsewhere. And again, Arjun demonstrated very clearly in the morning the kind of disadvantage that the shipbuilding industry faces. So I'm hoping that with this shipbuilding subsidy, some portion of that disadvantage to the Indian shipyards will be removed, because of which we will now be in a position to place orders with Indian yards, but not until we are ourselves also made competitive.
Yeah, thanks. So if I may ask you, from the INSA perspective, what are the three wish list? Just say to make this competitive.
There is only one wish list. Don't make me come to Delhi. So on a serious note, we have three big ticket items that hurt us. One is the lack of funding and finance, which is why I'm very keen here to listen to those who had spoken, Mr. Mukundan from NABFID, our co-panelists. So that's point number one, that we do not get long-term funding at competitive cost. Our assets are 25 years old, 20 years old, yet we get funding for only 6 years. We are unable to compete on cash flows. So the first thing is long-term competitive financing. The second is the tax on seafarers. our seafarers continue to get taxed. I'm not talking about the coastal, but the international. And the TDS provisions that apply to me, again, impair my competition. The third is the IGST on import of ships. Every time I buy a ship, I pay 5% additional IGST to the government of India. Whereas a foreign flag vessel, a Dynacom tanker or a Maersk container, when they come in, or a Seacon container comes in and competes with a container ship here in India, they don't have to pay the 5% IGST, we have to pay. And the last is the IGST that we pay on ship repair services. Our vessels are trading outside India, therefore we would repair our ships wherever we are trading. But when we spend money on repair of those ships, we have to pay 5% MRO reverse charge basis. That means if I spend 100 rupees in a yard in Indonesia to repair my ship, I have to pay 5 rupees GST here. Nobody in the world charges this. Japan doesn't charge it. They have a large ship repair industry. Malaysia doesn't charge it. And then to add insult to injury, when the vessel comes back, the customs then charges you 5% IGST on import of services back into India. So I get charged on the same thing twice. So 5% on repair, 5% on return by customs, 5% on IGST, lack of money, and TDS on seafarers.
Pallavi, you heard how to make the industry competitive, the cost of fund has to be competitive. So I would like to pick your idea on what innovative financing model, trends like syndicated loan or asset-backed securitization or green bonds could leverage to accelerate ship ownership and fleet growth. From your experience, how we can make it much more robust on the financing side of it?
Sure, Anil. So I wanted to address one point that Anil had made earlier about competitive ship financing for tonnage of 25 years, if I collected that correctly. So I think the one big disconnect that we have, and I'm speaking on behalf of more of the international banks, not so much on Indian banks, because that's the ecosystem we work in. We have a PRA who's our home regulator. There are rules that we have to abide by. So typically the asset size, the asset economic size, depending on which asset it is, but it's considered globally to be no more than 25 years. In certain cases, it will only be slightly lower, 17, 18 years. And that's how all the transactions abroad are placed, right? So you will want to have, you will want the entire loan to be paid off by the time the vessel is 17 or 18 years. And for large vessels, it's higher. So we work under this constraint. And the reason for that is because when we are pricing in our model, you don't get any benefit of the mortgage beyond that certain number of years. So if an organization is buying a 15-year-old vessel, then we are hugely challenged by what we can offer. But nevertheless, if someone is buying a new build or a 5-year-old vessel, we can actually give a 10-year loan with a 50% balloon, because that's how it can go to. So that is how international banks look at it. Indian banks, I know, look slightly different because you have RBI as a regulator. So they have slightly different capital slave mechanisms. So that is one part. Then you asked me about the innovative financing models, etc. I think we look at it as, probably 3 different parts to it. One is context. I think from morning, I'm sure you have been talking about the context, why it is so critical, and that's how the Sagarmala Maritime India Vision 2030 has come in. It is important to position India as a global shipping finance hub. I think all of you know Abhishek Pandey. We are hugely invested in terms of shipping alone in India. We've probably done majority of, we are happy to do any India flagged vessels. There are no concerns from our side at least, so we are good. But you do have structural constraints when you're looking at larger loans. And that is for Indian banks, I'm specifically talking about. I was in a conference actually in Mumbai yesterday for an aviation financing event. It was held by Airbus, and similar issues over there as well, right? The Indian banks have limited access to long tenor dollar financing. So that makes it difficult for them to have very long tenor loans. Rupee, I'm sure they can do. I think now is already infra status for shipping. So the compliance angle is sorted, but for a dollar loan, you have maturity and FX mismatches. Then for international banks, it is the Basel 3.1, which is the hanging dagger for all of us on how that risk weightage is going to be. In terms of innovative financing, I think you guys have done like a phenomenal job in terms of the MDF, etc., which has been put in. We've done a few transactions. Actually, there was one aviation transaction we did for, it's in the public domain, for 215 million, where we got a nationalized bank, Bank of India, to run with us, and then we syndicated and sold down the loan to an extent that we have no more paper left to be sold. We are at a de minimis level from a whole perspective. That's how we would like to originate. So if we want to originate, then we would like to pool credit from public sector banks. And we've been speaking to a lot of them, of course a lot of Indian banks, but a lot of banks like RBL, Yes Bank, Axis Bank, everyone is keen. I think everyone is at that stage where one or two of these banks come in. They have already come in, but in a bigger manner, it will be much better. The IFSC solves a lot of those issues which were there in terms of, ECB. You'll have to take an ECB from an Indian borrower. So now it is IFSC-based gift borrower entity is already overseas. So that is sorted out. The other, could be, this is something that we've been discussing just internally. So we don't think we had really a public voice so far. So we think that, from MDF, etc., if the government can provide a partial first loss deficiency guarantee, right? So you have this, I think, would garner a lot of interest from lenders. The minute you have an Exim India or you have MDF or someone coming in, putting their foot in and anchoring the transaction, lenders would be a lot more keen because now it is a lot more systematic. The blended finance has always been around, right? That is more of World Bank, etc. But I think with MDF over here, that is there. There is private credit as well, which is very active in these funds, but I wouldn't say, the major players are BlackRock, Apollo, Blue Owl, Carlyle, but I wouldn't say, to Anil's point, they are the cheapest of the lot. They can help structure a large, robust transaction, which can have co-lending, mezz debt, etc. This would probably, I would say, for very large transactions, but yeah, I think pooling of, there is such deep pockets of Indian banks that I think excluding them has been a little bit of, the mismatch that we've seen for Indian ship owners at least.
Thanks, Pallavi. That's an excellent perspective. To add to the point, Praveen, I'd like to add a very specific question to you. How green and blue bonds differentiate from the financing perspective?
Thanks, Anil. Devli has put that case in terms of the ships in operation and kind of a challenges he has mentioned very strongly. And earlier discussion also it went on in terms of there are two aspects of a vessel's operation or rather for a ship owner. One is the new construction and second while his vessel is in operation. The third element where it comes in, which is the challenge, which is basically the environmental and the sustainability IMO regulations. Now you have a vessel which is operational and there are ways to handle that, and one of them is basically green bonds and the blue bonds. Green bonds are necessarily, or rather not every time, but it mainly addresses the vessels in operation and the projects which you need to be financed, for towards a low emission solution. And therefore the green bonds are made for that specifically. Just for an example, I was associated with two major shipping companies. One of them used green bonds for the retrofitting of methanol power vessels. The second company used this same methodology or same, I would say, instrument, and they installed the scrubber. Now, this is basically related to operation part. Blue Bond usually looking at the ocean-related emission and the environmental aspect of the operation or the vessels. And therefore, a ship owner, when he is looking at a new building, he can, to a larger extent, not everything can be taken care, as Pallavi mentioned already in terms of the financing aspect. To a large extent, you can utilize the Blue Bond. Once again, I had an experience in my last assignment where a European owner gave us a task and we built ice class vessel for them. It's a cruise vessel. And they call it zero emission, but of course it was a combination of a large number of various green technology installed and commissioned there. 65% of the financing the owner obtained from European issuing by those blue bonds. And of course, he had also a support from the European government. So prima facie, it is something like this, that you have a green bond, you have a blue bond. You can actually issue the bonds so that you can refinance your retrofit projects. And in other cases, you build a vessel which actually is handling on the ocean-related emission. And I'm also talking about the port infra also. Now, when you combine this, then you actually are able to obtain sustainability loan also. And this is something I'm not too sure in terms of how much percentage of that will cover your cost or rather investment, but I'm sure looking at these individual projects of green bonds and blue bond, you can definitely deal with, and that's the difference. That kind of a freedom is given to the ship owner.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. Before I go to the next question, if you have any questions and observation, don't wait for the last end of the session. Please feel free to ask. Yeah, there is one question at the back.
Hi, thank you. I'm Neha. I'm from IFC, part of World Bank Group. So I was just wondering that, since we had this discussion on the green and blue bonds, is sustainability linked bonds also something that the industry is open to? Because I see that a lot of, organizations, including in India, are already following or have disclosed their scope 1, 2 emissions. And this is something that can easily be leveraged to sort of commit to sustainability targets. And here the end use of the funds is not restricted. Just a quick reflection on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Pallavi, you want to just add on to this point on the sustainability part?
Yes, definitely. So we do look at sustainability financing as such. I will stick with the financing part rather than just bonds. Each bank has its own to say policies and procedures, but we have something called a transition finance framework. What happens over there is, you have that and you have green financing, you have blue financing, right? The green financing is fairly standard. We have details Praveen shared about the green and blue bonds. The same kind of fundamentals apply. Sometimes you have financing which is not as as clear as what we want it to be. It's neither blue nor it is green, but you still have elements on the shipping which will ensure that the carbon emission is lower at the end of the day. And that is what fits into our transition finance framework, where we have we have declared that this is a large fund that we want to deploy. So these obviously these can't be just lofty goals, it needs to be measurable. So they can be done in various ways. You could have Poseidon Principles linked framework where, if you are above the numbers that have been set out by IMO over the next 7-10 years of the asset life or the loan life of the asset, then you get a short kicker in terms of reduction in pricing. So that is our way of encouraging still, shipping assets, which are definitely it is a hard to abate sector, but there is definitely an objective to transition it from here to, there where your overall emissions are going to reduce. So yeah, StanChart actually was one of the founding signatories to Poseidon Principles. So that's something that we track very closely. And yes, so we can do various kind of financing, bonds or otherwise loans as well, which are linked on sustainable principles that have been set out by the World Bank.
Thank you, Pallavi. Anil, we know about Maritime Development Fund, that MDF. How does it help the Indian shipping companies to source competitive funding?
I must confess that the Maritime Development Fund, much is known about it through the speeches of the finance minister and news items that you read. We know that some 25,000 crores is available. We know that some 49% will be put in by the government, and the balance 51 would be sourced from private funds. But beyond that, as an industry, we have very little information on what is happening in the Maritime Development Fund. We also understand that it will not be providing any debt funds, it will only be providing some kind of equity. Now that has its own related problems, if my understanding is correct, because we don't have very large companies, and where we have large companies, they are listed. I may be speaking from a point of ignorance. I am actually speaking from a point of ignorance, but I worry how would a listed company be able to get somebody to infuse equity. Now, will it be in a single purpose company? Because in India, we don't have single purpose companies. All of us buy our ships because our financing is all balance sheet related. So there are a lot of questions, there are a lot more questions. I would use your forum, Anil, to think that more information needs to be given out. In the afternoon pre-lunch, Mukundan was chairing a session, and I was very encouraged that NAFID, when he said that NAFID is advising the government on the structure. We understand that the structure will be similar to what has been done for NIIF, which is again encouraging. But until more details are available, we do not know how this will help us to be able to obtain competitive finance, so that we are able to, because though we have got this infrastructure status as an alternative to what we have to do, but we haven't seen any Power Finance Corporation or even our own Sagarmala Development Corporation, which is supposed to start providing funding, are not yet ready. Maybe it's in the pipeline, maybe it will happen, but as we speak today, here and now, we don't have any visibility on that.
Okay. Thank you. Pallavi, another question when it comes to liquidity, because there's a competition among the sectors as well, right? So what's your take on the global liquidity for financing shipping assets?
Sure. So generally, globally also, shipping is a very capital intensive industry. So financing needs are quite substantial. The key for us, I mentioned upfront, was the whole capital restrictions that have been set up. Now, there was a 2008 financial crisis. After that, stricter capital requirements have come in, and because of which you would have seen so many traditional European shipping banks have either left the industry or have been scaled back from lending perspective to this sector. So the capital restrictions definitely continue. Asset valuation, one of the things that we usually face is, for the last 6-7 years, of course, it's been slightly different, but in general, the vessel assets which are used for collateral for the loan also fluctuate largely in value. Right? So when the asset values decline, we see a LTV covenant breach. Now that also requires then banks to demand for more collateral or loan repayment, which may not be feasible. So there are headwinds over here for sure, and then you have the geopolitical instability, etc., playing in as and when. But despite this, I would say the liquidity is strong. It is, however, selective. So just in terms of numbers, the global ship finance commitments are in excess of $300 billion. This is a marine money number, latest number. But the market is very polarized. Either it is very high for blue chip companies or ESG aligned owners. And it is thin for lower tonnage or sub-investment grade credits. And like was mentioned just now, you don't have a lot of, at least from an India perspective, you don't have very big shipping companies within India. So in that sense, India sees the thinner side of liquidity. There is private credit and leasing that has come in. They've taken in terms of the gaps that have been left by these European lenders. But these are alternative pools of liquidity. They come at higher yields. We've seen of recent times, I mean, the last 2-3 years, we've seen one trend in FPSOs at least, where private credits have started coming in, because the FPSOs are built at $1.5 billion to $2 billion kind of a cost size. It's also gone up substantially post-inflation, post-COVID. And who's going to, when we try and underwrite and syndicate the transaction also, even if we put together every single bank that we know who will take a stake in this, you're still coming short, which is where private credits are kind of stepping in. So, I mean, then you have the Chinese leasing companies, you have the Japanese operating lessors, JOLCO transactions, which previously were not possible in India because of tax implication, but now it is possible because of IFSC. So, global pool is liquid, but it is definitely fragmented. The capital does demand bankable structures. We don't see, I think one of the things that I had read and quite encouraging from India perspective is, all of these, I think we are talking about SCI and Concur, SCI and oil companies. One of the things to make a structure bankable, when I say, is to have long-term charter contracts. Even the lender going in wants to, if you're giving a long-term loan, you want to see some certainty to the cash flows. If you are always on spot, you are taking literally the asset downturn view, which is not what lenders play. It's an equity play, right? It's not for lenders at all. So yeah, I mean we are seeing globally private sectors to come take over. But again, my point again is, if we can make bankable structures which can get Indian banks into it, then nothing like it. We have them already. They will not have an issue with jurisdiction risk. It's just a matter of them understanding this sector better.
Okay, thanks. Another question which comes to my mind for Anil and for Pallavi, any one of you. See, we are talking about the shipbuilding as being an aspirational kind of sector in India. Then definitely new companies, new entrants should come in. If I am an aspirational investor in this, is it easy for me to get the funding? Yep.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. One of the things at INSA that we follow and we try and as a philosophy is to try and see how we can benefit the smallest owner. Because the large owners, the big boys like Great Eastern or Seven Islands or SCI, have a balance sheet, they have a strength of their own, they've reached a certain areas, it's easy for them to run. So you're right, but if tomorrow, say Captain Anil Radhakrishnan decided that he want to buy a ship, and we have several mariners, either master mariners or engineers, but I always say this when I talk to CMMI or IMEI, that it's surprising that how few of them, how mariners are entrepreneurs in shipping, ship owning. We have, ship management companies. And that is largely because of, and to answer your question upfront, there is a huge stumbling block today to be able to get financing. One can't blame, of course, the banks, like Pallavi said. There is an absence of long-term contract. Now, if you had a long-term contract, say, GAIL decided that they needed to import LNG, and they came up with a contract and they said that we'll give a contract. The contract is for 20 years, but you get an LNG vessel and invite even foreigners to come in. But then say, have that vessel flagged in India and give preference, some kind of a preference to Indian entrepreneurs. Now, if we did that, it would be easy for you tomorrow because let's say you're an LNG captain. So you know how to handle, you could get 2 or 3 others with you, go to Pallavi and say, here's a contract that I have from GAIL. Pallavi will then be happy because the guys who are countersigning are a first-class Government of India charterer. You build the ship in a good yard, come in and put it here. So yeah, but in the absence of all of this, you're absolutely right. Even the smaller owner wanting to have a barge, for example, is required to today mortgage his home and then look for finance. He's not going to do that. I mean, it's silly. You work for 20 years, you save some money and you come back and then you take all of that and put it on it's not going to happen. It's silly that. So this is a problem. You're absolutely correct. And we need to find a solution to this.
Exactly. Praveen, what's your take on from the shipyard perspective?
Yeah, when we talk about the shipyard, we are actually looking at the owner. And I have gone through quite a bit points which even Devli has mentioned here. The shipyard and the owner, we are looking at expanding our ownership here. I mean, the fleet owns. And there has to be a linkage between the owner and the shipyard, some incentive linkage. And this is something which even today DGMA sir was talking about it, and it's fantastic. It was really great. But when we come to actually implementation, it's not very clear how that owner and the shipyard is linked together. We are not talking about just a conventional vessel. We are talking about what we are looking at now, years to come. We're talking about 2050, different technologies. The shipyard have to prepare themselves for the new technology, tie up with the companies. And then you have, in order for the financing, which the experts have already described very well, I mean, this is something I'm learning for me also, that you can then utilize the available incentive which I mentioned in terms of the blue bond. And of course, there are certain ifs and buts there because you still need additional funding, but the incentive need to be linked with shipyard and the owner. Therefore, you can offer financing advantage to the vessels which are there in our yard. That is very important. The nature of financing based on the government's policy, based on the banks and the financial institution, they can decide together. There is no problem on that. I don't see much of a problem. Government policies were a very straight line. Every factor is well defined. But there is a freedom with the finance institutes and the banks, and then they can meet this. So that's what I feel in terms of shipyards.
Thanks, Aparin. Any questions, any observation, any comments from your side? Because, yeah, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Rishu Singh. So I have a question for Mr. Anil. Since he said that it is probably easier for him to flag their vessel outside of India, so how do you see, sir, when the government plans for an international registry, how do you see will that solve your problem, or maybe the government needs to think about making another flag of convenience? Can it, solve your problem or make it easy for you to register more ships in India?
Whatever is intended to be done in an international ship registry or in a second registry or in a third registry can be done in the first registry. If law permits that we can have a ship or ownership of vessels can be in the similar fashion as it is happening in, say, a Marshall Islands or in a Liberia or in a Panama, then there is, in my opinion, no need of a second registry. If legally that structure can be created for vessels which are currently available or will be available from tomorrow, there is no need of a second registry. So our view is that creation of a second registry is like saying that, I am giving you paratha, now I will give you roti. It doesn't matter, as long, you're giving me something just in a different fashion. If all the benefits that accrued along with ownership of Indian flag, and which I enumerated, we are not looking, we are one industry who have never asked for a subsidy. All that we keep saying is make us competitive like our competition can. So foreign ships come and operate in India, carry Indian cargo. They are absolutely welcome. They are able to carry 90% of our cargo because we are not able to compete with them for that cargo here. So all that needs to be done is to not create a second registry, third registry, no registry. Just ensure that these tax problems that we are facing, if these are resolved, we are able to compete, and then we'll stand on our own and fight. As Indians, I don't think if today with these disadvantages, if we are able to still carry a fair bit of cargo, we carry close to about 35% of India's FOB crude oil imports. Despite all of this, we carry 44% of India's LPG imports, which is a great move, madam, from the time when, even 10 years when you were from there on. So we are able to compete, we are able to fight. But fighting today with, both your hands tied behind your back makes it all the more difficult to keep taking on the chin.
Thank you. Thanks, Anil. Pallavi, I think I have time because Sandeep has given me a dictum right now to be on time. So I have one more time for one more question, and then we'll wind up. Pallavi, from your experience advising ship finance in India, this is very interesting because we always talk about policy. What are the most practical policy measures to enhance ship ownership in India?
So I think this is a question that has been that is in hot discussion for the last 2 years at least. I've seen there are different forums that are going on, which are very correctly have identified everything. I think the team has been going out taking feedback from banks in addition to various other stakeholders, and we see that there is a lot of things that are changing or in various forms of implementation. The bareboat registration for Indian, for foreign flagged vessels is one of those. I know this was something which has been highly debated. There could be some other things. One, I think from our experience we can say, and this has also been debated, but I have very specific cases. When you compare the India flag, which we can fund, there is no issue at all. But when you compare it with, let's say, another flag of convenience transaction, the mortgage registration for a Marshall Islands or one of these FOCs is created the same day as the date of disbursement. We have seen that vessel registration, and I can tell you that I've spoken to a couple of other banks in the street across a building, and they tell us that one of the reasons they are not wanting to do India flagged vessels is because the mortgage process is so long that credit kind of panics to have an unsecured loan for that kind of period. We have seen as long as a month being taken. I can say that that is not the norm, but it is a longer process for C, and which is seen as risky. So this is one part to it. The other is how just to take a step back and to tell you how banks look at it, which flags they can finance and they cannot finance is they do something similar to an assessment of the jurisdiction itself. So from the time of arrest, how long does it take post arrest to sell the vessel and get the money back? This analysis, when it is done for Singapore, it is 30 days. This analysis, when it is done for India, is a lot longer. So what we have is tiering of these flags. So the FOCs will typically have a more higher tiering which also means that your capital that you provide for this particular loan is lower than the other tier countries like India or Bangladesh or Indonesia or the likes. So it's a long thing. I know it is not. There are no easy shortcuts to this, but definitely there is alignment of interest on this. There could be more dedicated maritime courts which can fast track cases. I think that's a feedback which has consistently been there, and I think it is. I've heard from lawyers that it has become better, but how you increase the likability of a flag will depend on an extreme case of a default and how quickly can you get your money back.
Anil, you would like to add?
So Pallavi, sorry, I've been watching you, so I hope you can see me. Thank you very much for that input. In fact, you're right, we have been facing this feedback from several of our members that when foreign banks are funding them, they tell them don't flag in India, flag them in Singapore or Panama or Liberia, etc. And I've been asking why. And you have put a finger on one important point, that is from the time of a default to the time taking charge of the vessel or being able to liquidate their asset, the time taken. So thank you so much for that input. We will work on that and try and see how we can get better on that account. But coming to the enforcement of a mortgage and registration, I think I must provide you with some information. I can now, as a user, as a ship owner, I can tell you that it is now normal for a ship's registry to get completed within 24 hours in India. This has become the norm. I have registered ships in Cyprus, I have registered ships in Malta and in Panama. And it takes just as much time as it takes in the other registry. So to that extent, I'm happy to say this to you. And this is not a one-off that has happened. I've seen this happen in 4 consecutive ships. In one case, because of an emergency, we had to get a registry on a Sunday. And the registry was granted on a Sunday. So that's something that you may want to sing. As far as the mortgage is concerned also, I can certify that at certain POs, and this is not the best way to look at it, it must be system driven and not person driven, but at a majority of the principal offices where we register the mortgage, we can now carry out the mortgage within 24 hours. But it's not all India. So I wouldn't say that we get 100%, 100 marks there. Maybe we get 70% marks there. But on the registration, we have improved. But I take your point on this, default and then being able to liquidate. I think, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for actually pointing this out. And we'll, as INSA, try and work on this, because at the end of the day, if we are able to show you that we are able to do better, probably banks like you may be interested in looking at financing under the Indian flag someday. So thank you for that.
Thanks a lot, Anil. Thanks, Pallavi. All three of you, Pallavi, Anil and Praveen, you've been an amazing panelist, and all of you for patient listening and your valuable inputs. Thanks, Sandeep and team, for a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. Request you to kindly stay back and request DG, Mr. Sandeep Khosla, to kindly give a token of appreciation to our panelists. Thank you. Please to stay back for a group photo. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anil, माझ्यातर्फे पण collect करा.
Applause, please. Let's have the applause coming. Thank you.
Thank you.